On the planet Pharrell 9, every young alien child was bonded with a guardian by the time they turned 7. The bond was for safety, for survival, and for strength in a galaxy full of danger. Each year, a ceremony was held in the Great Dome, where families came to choose a child. Bright lights, loud music, and shining banners filled the place. But in one quiet corner, a small girl sat alone, her back against the wall, her head low. Her name was Zari. Zari was different. One of her legs dragged slightly when she walked, and her right eye glowed dim blue, flickering like a broken lamp. She didn't speak much, and she never smiled. No family had ever chosen her. 3 years had passed, and each year she waited, hoping only to be passed again. The others called her useless, damaged, unfit. Even the bonding officers whispered behind her back, "She's still here? Why hasn't she been recycled? Maybe she's cursed." Zari heard everything, but said nothing. She had learned long ago that speaking made things worse, so she sat still, hands in her lap, eyes watching the ground. This year, something was different. A group of humans had been invited to join the program. They were stronger, taller, and spoke with deep voices and strange words. One of them stood near the back of the room, leaning on a metal cane. He had short black hair, a scar on his cheek, and eyes that had seen war. His name was Daniel. Daniel wasn't like the others. He didn't laugh or chat with the bonding agents. He didn't rush forward to see the healthy children with bright eyes and perfect limbs. He looked at Zari, and only at her. The other guardians made faces when they saw his interest. One woman whispered, "He must be joking." A tall alien male chuckled. "Poor human doesn't know what he's looking at." But Daniel didn't react. He kept his eyes on Zari, as if trying to read her thoughts. Zari felt uncomfortable under his gaze. No one had ever looked at her like that. Not with pity, not with disgust, but with something else. Something calm, something still. The event continued. One by one, children were chosen, matched, celebrated. Each time a name was called, Zari's small heart beat faster, hoping only to be let down again and again soon. The floor cleared, and only Zari was left. The bonding officer sighed and turned away. "That's all for today," he announced. But then Daniel stepped forward. "Wait," he said, his voice low but firm. "I haven't chosen yet." The officer blinked, confused. "Sir, the other children have already been selected." Daniel nodded. "I'll take her," he said, pointing to Zari. The room froze. "You mean her?" the officer asked, stunned. Zari looked up slowly, not believing her ears. Everyone stared, jaws open. Even Zari's mouth parted slightly in shock. "She's not fit," someone called out. "She's defective," another shouted. "Why waste your time?" Daniel didn't flinch. He walked toward Zari, slowly, due to his limp. He stopped in front of her and crouched, his knees cracking slightly. He looked into her eyes. "You have a name?" he asked gently. Zari opened her mouth, then closed it again. After a moment, she whispered, "Zari." He nodded once. "All right then, Zari," he said. "Come with me." He stood up and offered his hand. Zari stared at it. Her small hand trembled as she reached out. Fingers touched his rough palm, and he helped her stand. Gasps and murmurs filled the hall as they walked toward the exit. A tall alien boy stepped in their path. "She's broken," he sneered. "She'll slow you down." Before Daniel could speak, the boy shoved Zari lightly. She stumbled but didn't fall. Daniel's hand moved fast, grabbing the boy's wrist. "Touch her again," he said coldly, "and you'll wish you hadn't." The boy pulled back, frightened. Daniel turned to Zari. "You okay?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. Together, they walked out of the Great Dome, into the bright afternoon light. For the first time in her life, Zari wasn't alone. Someone had chosen her, not because she was strong or pretty or perfect, but because he saw something in her no one else did. And for the first time, a small spark lit inside her heart. Not hope, not yet, but something close. Asterisk rain fell softly on the metal roof. as Daniel carried a small bag in one hand and walked beside Zari through the quiet road. She limped quietly at his side, not speaking, not looking up. Her thin arms hugging her chest, the drops hit her face, but she didn't seem to care. Daniel glanced down at her, wondering what kind of life she had before. He had seen pain in the eyes of soldiers, but never in a child like this. Not this deep, not this silent. They reached his shelter just outside the city walls, an old maintenance shack from his time as a station repairman. It was small but warm, and it had tools, old food packs, and a single bed with thick covers. Zari stepped inside slowly, as if afraid it would disappear. Daniel lit the room's small power lamp, casting a gentle orange glow. "Sit anywhere," he said, then paused. "Or stand or walk around, whatever you like." Zari didn't respond. But she moved toward a bench and sat down carefully, as if her weight might break it. Daniel opened a food pack and set it on the table near her. The smell of warm protein stew filled the air. He slid it toward her with a spoon. She looked at it, then at him, unsure. "It's not poisoned," he said with a small smile. "And I won't take it back." After a long pause, she picked up the spoon and began to eat, small, slow bites, like she expected someone to stop her. The rain grew louder outside, tapping the roof like fingers. Daniel leaned against the wall and crossed his arms. "You're not what they say," he muttered. More to himself than to her. Zari didn't answer, but her hand paused midair, then kept moving. Her body was thin, and her hair was matted, but her eyes, that flickering blue one and the normal dark one, were watching everything. She was smart. That much was clear. Later, she curled up in a corner of the room, refusing the bed when Daniel offered. He didn't push her, just handed her an old blanket and went to sleep on the other side. In the middle of the night, he woke to a strange humming sound. He turned and saw Zari sitting up, staring at the old repair drone in the corner. Its lights were blinking slow. Confused, she reached out and touched a panel on it, and the thing shuddered, then stood up properly. Daniel sat up slowly, watching. She wasn't just activating it, she was talking to it. The drone beeped, turned toward her, and responded with a chirp. He stood and stepped closer, and Zari noticed. Pulling her hand back quickly, the drone powered down again, like nothing happened. "How did you do that?" Daniel asked quietly. Zari looked scared, like she had done something wrong. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. Daniel knelt beside her, not angry, just curious. "You can interface with machines?" She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Sometimes. When they're broken." Daniel stared at the drone, then at her glowing eye. "That's not just a broken implant, is it?" Zari shook her head slowly. "I don't know what it is." Daniel leaned back and rubbed his jaw. "Whatever it is, it's not useless," he said. She looked at him like she didn't believe that word belonged to her. Daniel stood up, walked to a shelf, and pulled down a half-broken communicator. "Try fixing this," he said, placing it gently in her lap. Zari touched it with both hands, her fingers trembling slightly. Blue lines from her eye pulsed softly, and the device lit up. Daniel gave a low whistle, impressed. "You're full of surprises, kid." She handed it back and looked away. "I didn't mean to fix it so fast," she mumbled. Daniel smiled again. "You don't have to hide it," he said. "Around me. You don't have to hide anything." Outside, a pair of glowing lights hovered in the sky. Faraway security drones doing a sweep. Zari looked up at them through the window, then lowered her head quickly. Daniel followed her gaze, then turned off the inside lights. "Something you want to tell me?" he asked. She didn't speak, but her hands clenched the blanket tighter. "They're looking for you?" A tiny nod, barely visible in the dark. Daniel didn't ask more, not tonight. He simply sat beside her, back to the wall, and shared the quiet. In this quiet, something changed. Zari, the girl no one wanted, had just fixed something important. Not the communicator, not the drone, not even her own past. She had repaired something inside Daniel, something he didn't even know was broken. Trust, maybe, or hope. And as the rain slowed and the room fell silent again, Zari whispered something. Barely loud enough to hear. "Thank you." Daniel didn't say anything back. He just leaned his head back, closed his eyes, and smiled. The next morning, Daniel woke up to a strange beeping noise. His eyes opened slowly, and he looked around the room. Zari was standing near the workbench, staring at the old scanner device he had taken apart months ago. It was glowing, active, and making a soft rhythmic pulse. She hadn't touched it, not with her hands. But her strange blue eye was glowing brighter than ever. He sat up quietly, watching. Zari didn't know he was awake yet. Her head tilted slightly, and the scanner changed frequency, as if responding to her thoughts. Then she blinked, and the whole device shut down. She turned around and saw him sitting up. Her body stiffened, like she had been caught stealing. "I didn't break it," she said quickly. Daniel raised a hand slowly, not angry, just calm. "I know," he said. "I saw." Zari looked down, unsure what to say next. Daniel stood, stretched his back, and walked over to the table. He picked up the scanner, now warm and humming softly. He had tried to fix it for weeks, failed every time, and now it was running like new. "That eye of yours," Daniel said. "It's not broken." Zari didn't answer. "Do you remember where it came from?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Only flashes. Loud noises, bright lights, and someone holding me down." Daniel nodded slowly. He walked over to the shelf and pulled down an old diagnostic tool. "Sit here," he said, pointing to a stool near the wall. Zari hesitated but obeyed, her movements stiff and cautious. He scanned her eye with the tool. The screen filled with strange symbols, data streams, and an unknown energy signature. Daniel frowned, scrolling through the readout. "This tech," he muttered. "It's not common." Zari sat still watching. His hands. "I think your eye holds something more," he said. "Maybe memories. Maybe commands, maybe both." She didn't understand fully, but the word memories made her nervous. "Can someone see through it?" she asked. Daniel looked up, surprised by the question. "You mean like a live feed?" She nodded. He checked the signal log and paused. "There was a spike," he said quietly. "Last night, something sent out a pulse." Zari's breath caught in her throat. "Then they know," she whispered. Daniel leaned closer. "Who?" She didn't want to say, but something in his voice made her speak. "I was part of a test group," she said softly. "A long time ago. They wanted to make smart weapons out of children. They said I failed. They left me." Daniel's face turned grim. His jaw tightened. "So they made you, called you broken, and threw you away." Zari nodded slowly. "I remember fire, and pain, and someone shouting to shut me down." Daniel sat back in his chair, letting the truth sink in. This girl wasn't just unlucky, she was experimented on, altered, and abandoned. And now, whoever did it was probably watching again, outside. A low hum echoed in the sky. Zari looked up sharply, her eye glowing once more. Daniel moved to the window and saw a small black dot moving slowly across the clouds. A surveillance drone, too far to shoot down, but close enough to scan. "They're here," Zari said, her voice shaking. Daniel didn't panic. He went to the back room and pulled out an old energy jammer. He set it on the table and switched it on. A small pulse spread across the shack. Like a ripple of heat, the drone paused, hovered, then drifted away, confused. Zari's hands clenched the edge of her seat. "I don't want to go back," she whispered. "You won't," Daniel replied without hesitation. "They'll come," she said, her voice almost a whisper now. "They always come." Daniel crouched beside her again, his voice calm but strong. "They can come," he said, "but they're not taking you." Zari didn't know what to say. No one had ever promised to protect her, not even the scientists who made her. For a moment, she looked at Daniel not as a stranger or a guardian, but as something new, something solid, something safe. He stood and walked back to his tools, pulling together wires, scraps, and comms. Old casing, If they're watching, he said, then we send them something to watch. Zari tilted her head, confused. What do you mean? Daniel smirked, a bit of the soldier in him showing. We give them a signal back, but our signal, not theirs. For the next few hours, they worked side by side, building something strange, half decoy, half message. Zari followed his steps carefully, copying everything he did. She didn't speak much, but when she did, it was clear she understood machines in a way even he didn't. Together, they activated the decoy, sending out a false trail deep into the forest. Miles away, the drone picked up the ping and turned sharply, flying in the opposite direction. Daniel watched the scanner blink, then shut it off. He looked at Zari, who gave the tiniest smile. You're learning fast, he said. I have a good teacher, she replied. And for the first time, her voice didn't shake that night. Under a sky full of quiet stars, Zari sat beside the man who chose her. Not as a burden, not as a project, but as something real. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for now, she wasn't just surviving. She was starting to live. Zari had never touched a flower before. Now she was staring at one, a tiny blue petal blooming between two cracks in the workshop. Wall, she reached out, gently, not sure if it would vanish like the rest of her dreams. It didn't. It stayed, soft and real in her fingers. Daniel watched from across the room, holding a mug of recycled tea. She's got guts, he whispered to himself. Even flowers know that. The last few days had been different. Zari spoke more, asked questions, and even laughed once when Daniel burned his fingers on a fried circuit. She started waking up early, cleaning tools, and sorting wires without being asked every time she fixed something. Daniel praised her, and every time he did, a little light returned to her face. But something still hung in the air, something unspoken. Her eyes still flickered at night, sometimes showing flashes, images of people she didn't recognize, and sometimes numbers, shapes, strange codes. Daniel knew the eye wasn't just a memory vault. It was a key, or maybe a lock. That morning, he finally said what had been on his mind. I want to try unlocking it. Zari froze, halfway through rebuilding a damaged voice modulator. Why? She asked quietly. I think there's more inside, he replied. Something they don't want you to know. Zari looked down at the table, her hands trembling slightly. What if it hurts? Daniel knelt beside her. Then I'll stop, he said. The moment you ask. She nodded once, slow and unsure. They sat across from each other, Daniel connecting the cable from her eye port to the diagnostic console. He powered it on, and the lights dimmed slightly as the machine hummed. Zari sat still, her breaths shallow, her hands gripping the chair. Then a low sound echoed through the room like a heartbeat. Mechanical and steady, the console blinked, then displayed a message in an ancient alien language. Daniel translated it slowly. Project Ruel 07. He read aloud, genetic tech hybrid, classified asset, restricted memory access. Zari flinched. More text followed. Emergency. Shutdown activated. Memory sealed due to unstable emotional response. Daniel's eyes narrowed. You were locked away because you felt too much. Zari didn't answer, but tears slipped down her cheeks. I was crying, she whispered, and they said I was broken. The console offered an option. Override emotional lockdown. Daniel looked at her, asking without words. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. He tapped the command, and the machine whirred louder. Suddenly, Zari gasped, her eye glowing a deep blue. Images poured through the screen. Labs, needles, metal beds, scientists arguing, alarms blaring, then something strange. A gentle voice, female, older, whispering to Zari in the dark. You're more than they say. You're not a mistake. Zari clutched her chest, shaking. Daniel moved to her side and held her shoulder. It's okay, he said. You're not there anymore. She looked up at him, eyes wide and wet. I remember her, she said. The kind one. She tried to hide me. The final image showed a memory recorded through Zari's own eye. She was escaping, running through a firelit hallway, holding something close to her chest, a small glowing cube. "What's that?" Daniel asked, pointing to the object. Zari blinked, confused. "I don't know," she said. I lost it." The system shut down suddenly, like someone had cut the line from far away. Daniel checked the console fried circuits. Power blown. "Someone saw the access," he muttered. "They'll come." Zari said again, her voice thin. "They'll want what I carried." Daniel walked to his locker and pulled out a bag. "We're leaving," he said. "Now." Zari stared at him. "But where?" Daniel zipped the bag and looked at her with calm certainty. "Someplace they can't track us." They packed only what they needed: tools, food rations, a blaster, and the damaged drone Zari liked to fix. By sunset, they were on a hoverbike, headed toward the eastern cliffs. The sky burned orange behind them, and the world seemed too quiet. Halfway through the ride, Daniel felt a warm pressure on his back. Zari had leaned forward, her arms around him. Not tightly, just enough. She didn't speak, but he felt it, the bond, the one she was never allowed to have. Not with machines, not with scientists, not with cold data rooms, but now, with a human who chose her, who trusted her, and who never asked her to be anything other than herself. As the wind rushed past them, Zari closed her eyes. For the first time in her life, she wasn't running from something. She was running with someone. The wind howled against the cliffs as Daniel parked the hoverbike behind a wall of stone. Zari climbed down slowly, her legs sore, her eyes scanning the dark horizon. Far below them, the forest stretched like a sea of shadows, and above, stars blinked like distant eyes. Daniel placed his hand on the rocky surface, feeling for warmth. It was cold, dry, untouched for years. "This place used to be a mining site," he said softly. "No one comes here anymore." Zari didn't answer, but she followed him inside a narrow cave. She held the drone close to her chest, its shell cracked but still blinking faintly. The air inside was dry and silent, the kind of silence that made even breathing sound loud. Daniel set up a low camp light, its orange glow bouncing off the walls. They sat in silence for a while, listening for anything that didn't belong. Then came the sound, faint at first, a distant hum, almost like a whisper. Zari looked up sharply, her eye flickering bright. "They found us," she said, not surprised, not panicked, just tired. Daniel stood, grabbed his blaster, and checked the charge. "We're not running this time," he replied. "We'll see who's really hunting who, outside." 3 figures dropped from a stealth ship onto the rocky ground. They wore dark armor, marked with the same emblem Zari remembered from her dreams. The symbol of the lab, sharp lines shaped like a shattered eye. One of them scanned the area and pointed toward the cave. "This is where the signal ended," he said coldly. "Let's finish this." Inside the cave, Daniel had already set up a trap. Zari watched closely as he rigged wires to a pressure plate and mounted the drone near the entrance. "You remember how this drone works?" he asked her. Zari nodded. "Good," he said. "When I give the signal, light it up." She didn't ask what he meant by signal. She knew he'd make it clear. Minutes passed. Then the first intruder stepped into the cave mouth. The trap clicked. But the soldier jumped back, alert and trained. He barked a command, and 2 more followed, weapons drawn, lights scanning. Daniel stepped into view, arms raised, looking calm. "Looking for someone?" he said, voice dry like the dust around them. The leader sneered. "Hand over the girl," he demanded. Daniel smiled slightly. "Which one?" The lights flickered suddenly, and the drone Zari had reprogrammed shot a blinding pulse across the walls. The soldiers covered their eyes too late, their visors frying with static. Zari stepped forward, lifting a pipe and swinging it toward the nearest one's leg. The blow wasn't strong, but it was enough. He slipped and fell hard. Daniel moved fast, disabling another with a clean shot to the shoulder. The 3rd soldier charged him, but Daniel ducked and struck him with the butt of the blaster. Everything happened in seconds. Fast, loud, full of heat and panic. Then the cave fell silent again. The soldiers groaned on the floor, stunned but alive. Zari stood in the middle of the chaos, her chest rising and falling. Her eye blinked wildly, reacting to something nearby. Daniel checked the pack one of the soldiers carried and pulled out a small glowing object. A tracking device, pulsing red. They weren't here to capture, Daniel said, eyes narrowing. They were here to erase. Zari stepped closer. Looking at the device, it's the same glow. From my dream, she whispered. He turned the tracker over and opened it. Inside was a tiny cube, same size as the one she had carried as a child. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. The moment her skin touched the cube, her eye glowed. Blue and the cave lights pulsed. Memories rushed into her head, flashes of her younger self, holding the cube tightly, hiding it beneath metal floor tiles. It's a memory core, she said, voice barely holding steady. They wanted to erase me so this would be lost forever. Daniel looked at her, then at the cube. But now we have it, he said. Zari nodded slowly. Now we show the truth. Outside, the soldiers' ship still hovered, waiting. Daniel dragged the stunned bodies to the edge of the cave and signaled the ship with a stolen badge. When the hatch opened, he tossed the tracker inside. We'll let them chase shadows, he said. The hatch closed and the ship took off, fooled by the device. That night, as the stars returned to silence and the wind grew calm, Zari sat beside the fire Daniel had made. She held the cube close, like something sacred. Daniel sat across from her, watching the flames dance. You fought well, he said after a while. Zari looked down, unsure how to respond. I was scared, she whispered. He nodded. Everyone is, he said, but you didn't freeze. You didn't run. She looked up at him, the firelight dancing in her eyes. I didn't want to lose you, she said quietly. Daniel looked at her for a long time, then smiled. You won't, he said. Not now, not ever. The cold came in like a ghost, slow and silent, touching everything. Zari's fingers were stiff, her lips pale, her legs shaky from the climb. Daniel leaned against the stone wall of an old ruin, breathing heavily, blood dripping from his arm. They had made it through the night. But the wound on his side was worse than he admitted. He smiled through the pain, trying to keep her calm. But Zari could see it. Even if he didn't say a word, he was hurt, and he was getting weaker. They had reached the top of the cliff ruins, a long-forgotten research station, half buried in snow and silence. Zari helped him inside, guiding his steps, her small frame barely strong enough to hold him up. The door creaked open, revealing dusty floors and broken lights. Daniel collapsed against a metal table, clutching his ribs. Just need a minute, he muttered, but his face had gone pale. Zari's chest tightened as she looked around. No working lights, no med unit, nothing left but dust and wires. She grabbed his bag and pulled out tools. Wires, anything she could find. I'll fix it, she whispered, more to herself than to him. I'll fix something. Daniel tried to lift his head. You don't have to, he said weakly. Zari didn't answer. She was already moving. She found a broken energy pad in the corner, pulled it apart, checked the circuits, and began rewiring it with shaky hands. She remembered everything he taught her, how to link copper to heat, how to isolate a power cell, how to test before trusting. Outside, wind howled against the walls, but inside, a faint hum filled the room. Zari had powered the table, turning it into a basic healing cradle. She dragged Daniel onto it, grunting under the weight, her arms trembling but steady. The machine blinked red at first, then yellow, then green, low energy, but enough to start a patch. Daniel let out a soft breath as the table began sealing. His wound, he opened his eyes slightly, looked at her, and gave a tired smile. You're full of surprises, he said. Zari sat beside him on the cold floor, her legs pulled close. You taught me, she whispered. I just remembered. The silence after that was heavy, but not empty. She watched the machine work, slow but steady, and felt something she hadn't felt since she was small. Purpose. For once, she wasn't just a burden, she was the reason someone would live through the night. As Daniel rested, she explored the ruin. Most systems were dead, but one door in the back opened with a soft hiss. Inside, she found a console covered in frost. A cracked screen still showing a faded symbol Ruel Labs. She froze, recognizing the logo from her dreams. Zari stepped forward, her glowing eye scanning the console. The machine blinked awake. Connecting to her instantly, a voice crackled to. "Life old and broken, but familiar. If you're hearing this, then you survived," she gasped, her knees nearly giving out. It was the kind voice again. The one from long ago. "You were never broken," the voice said. "You were different. And they feared that. They called you unstable, but I called you brilliant. You were never meant to be a weapon, Zari. You were meant to heal." Zari covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The screen displayed a video of her, younger, laughing in the arms of the woman who recorded it. A scientist, but more than that, a mother figure she never got. To remember properly, the cube she carried, now glowing brighter in her pocket, pulsed gently. It wasn't a weapon. It was a key, a cure, a piece of forgotten hope. She returned to Daniel and showed him the console. He watched the message with her, silent and still. When it ended, he looked at her, not with surprise, but with quiet pride. "So they lied to you," he said. Zari nodded. "But you didn't stay what they made you." He added, "No," she whispered, "because you didn't treat me like them." The fire crackled beside them, and for a moment, there was peace. Daniel reached out, his hand shaking, and Zari took it in both of hers. "You're not just a project," he said. "You're someone." She smiled through tears, her voice soft and full of warmth. "You're my someone too." Outside, the world kept turning, cold and harsh, but inside that broken ruin, something unbreakable was forming. Not a bond made by wires, or programming, or duty, but something real, something chosen. And for Zari, the girl who had always been told she didn't belong, she had never felt more needed, more wanted, more alive. The storm had passed, but the clouds still hung heavy in the sky. Zari stood on top of the old research station, the wind playing with her hair, her eye glowing steady blue. Below her, broken stone and forgotten machines lay buried in snow. Behind her, Daniel sat with a bandage on his side. Watching her quietly, he didn't speak, didn't interrupt. He just let her stand there, because she needed this moment. In her hand was the cube, warm and pulsing, full of memory and code. She had fixed it, unlocked it, and now it held the last message from the woman who had once called her brilliant. But that wasn't all it held. Inside was a broadcast key, a signal strong enough to wake up the satellites above the planet. If she used it, everyone would see the truth about her, the experiments, the lies, the ones who had tried to erase her, but also the human who had stood by her. Her fingers hovered over the trigger, trembling slightly. "What if no one cares?" she whispered. Daniel stood slowly and walked to her side. "They will," he said. "And if they don't, we'll still know who you are." She looked at him, searching his face for any doubt. There was none, and that was enough. Zari pressed the cube to her eye, and the pulse shot out like lightning, invisible but powerful, racing through the clouds, into the sky, into the system's old network. Lights on the station blinked alive for the first time in years. Antennas rose slowly, shaky but functional. The broken lab, once silent, now sang like a machine waking from a long dream. In orbit, a dead satellite flickered awake, its camera lens turning toward the planet, then another and another. Across the galaxy, screens began to glow. Military stations, science hubs, even civilian terminals suddenly filled with a message marked unknown priority. People watched, confused at first, then silent as the video began. A child no older than 6, with a broken eye and a soft voice. Her name Zari, her memories clear, painful, and true. The labs, the trials, the fear, the escape, but also the strength, the fight, the fire, and finally, the image changed. A human man holding her hand as they ran through the forest. Another clip Zari fixing a drone with glowing fingers. Then, Zari standing tall in front of the screen. Eyes glowing, voice steady. "I'm not broken," she said. "I was never broken, and I'm not alone." The message ended, and the galaxy fell quiet for a long time. No one said anything. Then the responses came. A scientist on Earth wept quietly in her lab, recognizing her own lost work. A commander in the outer colonies slammed his hand on the table, demanding answers from those who had funded the lab. Children on distant stations pointed to the screen and asked, "Is she a hero?" And on Varel 9, where the bonding program had first rejected her, the old hall filled with people replaying her words again and again. Back at the station, Zari sat beside Daniel, the fire warm between them. Her shoulders relaxed, her chest lighter. She had told her story, not for revenge, not for fame, but because truth needed air. And now she could breathe. Daniel handed her a warm cup of tea, the same bitter kind he always made. She sipped it and smiled. "Still tastes awful," she said. "Some things never change." He replied, grinning. The next day, a ship landed near the cliffs. Not a warship, not a lab team. Just a medical cruiser with a woman on board who looked at Zari with wide, tearful eyes. "I worked on your project," she said, falling to her knees. "I didn't know what they did after I left." Zari walked over slowly. The woman looked up, waiting to be punished, judged, rejected. But Zari held out her hand. "Instead, you can help now," she said. The woman took her hand and cried. Not from guilt, but from hope. More ships came, not to take her away, but to ask questions, offer support, learn. Zari didn't want to be a symbol or a name in a file. She only wanted to live, to build, to laugh again. In time, the bonding program changed. No child was left alone again. Even the ones with broken parts were seen differently now, because Zari had stood tall and refused to be erased. But through it all, she stayed by Daniel's side. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. He was not her creator, not her owner, not her commander, but he was her person. The one who looked at her when no one else would, and chose her, not for what she could do, but for who she was. Together, they rebuilt the station into something new. Not a lab, not a prison, but a home. And in that home, the girl no one wanted became the girl the galaxy couldn't forget.